Hi folks, welcome back. So today we're going to uncover one of the best kept secrets in electronics. Op amps are not perfect, but luckily for you, I'm going to show you how we can overcome those imperfections to make ourselves a nice 1 volt per octave voltage controlled oscillator. So we're going to start with a simple oscillator core like this one. In English, this is a basic oscillator that we can then derive other waveforms from later. This is handy because it means we have lots of different sound qualities that are all locked into the same pitch in the same module. So this is a really simple module that takes a control voltage in and outputs a waveform at a particular frequency. This one is going to output a thing called a sawtooth waveform, which is this waveform here in blue, and it sounds like this. So the fundamental function we need to achieve here is to get a voltage to ramp up and then reset very quickly. So you can probably guess we're going to use some sort of capacitor to achieve this. Let's have a look at how we're going to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put a capacitor in the feedback loop of an op amp. So what we know about op amps with feedback is that if the feedback goes to the negative terminal, then the op amp's output will try and make the two inputs equal. So we've got one terminal at ground, which is 0 volts. One way we can think about this is that if we put a current into one input by putting a voltage across that input resistor, then the op amp will output an equal and opposite current to neutralize that current. That current that the op amp outputs has to flow through the capacitor, which charges the capacitor up in a nice linear ramp because that current is constant. This circuit actually has a special name. It's called an integrator, which in plain English just means that the voltage at the output is proportional to the running summation of the input currents. So it adds current up over time. We can also think of this circuit as adding up the error between the two input voltages, if you prefer to think in terms of voltages. But this circuit highlights a massive imperfection with op amps. I can demonstrate it by grounding these two inputs. If I hold these two inputs at ground, the integrator output should stay at 0 because there's no difference between the two inputs, or you can think of it, we're not putting any current in here. What we can see is that the output is actually starting to drift away to the supply voltage. So how can the integrator be adding up these input currents if I haven't applied any? What is going on? Well, annoyingly for us, op amps aren't perfect. So we've been pretending that the inputs to these op amps don't require any current to function. That's not true. The input to the op amp is constructed of transistors, and transistors, even FET transistors like JFETs and MOSFETs, require a small bias current to function. This small bias current has to flow in through our input resistors, and that makes a small voltage drop across those input resistors. And remember we said earlier that the integrator adds up the error between the two inputs over time. So if we now have a very small voltage across one of those resistors, we have an error and the integrator is going to add that error up. Even if we attempt to nullify this by putting the same impedance at both inputs, because the two transistors aren't perfectly matched, there will still be a slight difference between these two inputs, causing a smaller but still noticeable error between the two inputs, which again, the integrator will add up. So the culmination of all these effects can be tricky to get your head around. Whatever the difference is, whether it be large or small depending on your resistors, there will end up being some difference between the inputs, and we call that difference the input offset voltage. And this input offset voltage causes an output offset current, and that output offset current has to flow through the capacitor, which will charge it up, causing it to drift up or down to either supply rail depending on the polarity of the current. I do go into this in a little bit more detail in my Patreon only version of this video, because this is really a whole video topic in itself. You can find that link down in the description. So the reason I picked a Sawtooth core as our first VCO core, we could have done a triangle, is that the way we solve this drifting problem with a Sawtooth core oscillator is very straightforward. I'm just going to put a switch here, and this will allow me to reset the integrator back to 0. And if I do this at regular intervals, I get a sawtooth wave. This essentially allows us to sidestep that issue of drift because we're only concerned about the amount of drift over the period of the sawtooth. To reduce the drift as much as possible, you usually see something like a CA3130 used in these applications because it's got a really high input impedance and really low bias currents. The only snag is that you have to limit the supply voltage with a few Zener diodes because it can't handle the full 30 volts of my power supply. Obviously, we're not going to do this by hand because we need to do this tens to hundreds of times a second. We're going to build a circuit that's going to do it for us. So we're going to turn to our trusty friend, the JFET, and put a JFET in parallel with our capacitor. We're going to use an N-channel JFET, which we can basically think of as a normally closed switch. So this will short the capacitor out when the gate is grounded. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold the gate of the JFET at a negative voltage to open up that switch, which allows the capacitor to charge. Then, when we ground the gate of the JFET, closes the switch, resetting the integrator, and then we can start all over again. So what we need is another little op-amp configuration that we've met briefly before, the comparator. This is a very straightforward circuit where you feed two voltages into the comparator and the output of the comparator tells you which of the two is larger. We're going to use a special made comparator IC, the LM311, to take advantage of its rapid output swing. So this is our comparator IC. What we're going to do is we're going to fix one input at 5 volts, and then it's just a matter of connecting the integrator up to the comparator. Now what's going to happen is when the integrator charges up to our 5 volt reference, the output of the comparator is going to go high, which will short out the capacitor, resetting the integrator, and then we start the cycle all over again. By varying this voltage source, we can control the current that comes into the integrator. So by changing the current, we can change the charging rate of the capacitor, which ultimately controls the frequency of oscillation of the oscillator. So the last trick with the comparator is that we actually have to set the output so that it goes to ground instead of goes to the positive supply. We don't want it to go all the way up to the positive supply, because if it goes all the way up to the positive supply, then it's going to forward bias our JFET, which could damage it. So we just set the output of the comparator with a pull-up resistor to ground. Now the comparator will swing from our negative voltage reference up to ground. So now when I connect this up, we see that we have a strange waveform that doesn't look quite right. As soon as it starts to discharge, it obviously goes below our threshold voltage, opening our JFET back up again and allowing the capacitor to charge. All we need to do to solve this problem is we put a capacitor from the output of the comparator back to the input, which will hold the comparator on for long enough to discharge the capacitor. So this now makes our oscillator work perfectly. The only downside to this is that we do have a small period while the capacitor is discharging where we've lost control of the oscillator, which will make the oscillator run slightly flat, especially at high frequencies. When we do the control voltage module in the next video, we'll compensate for this effect and we'll have no problems. So how do we work out how long to hold the comparator open for? So as always on the channel, there's a handy rule of thumb that will help us out. So if we multiply the on resistance, the resistance of the channel when the JFET is turned on, with the capacitance of our integrating capacitor, this gives us the time constant for charging or discharging that capacitor through that resistance. In one time constant, the capacitor will have discharged by about 63% from its initial value. So that's not that helpful on its own, but in 5 of these time constants, the capacitor will have discharged all the way down to 0. So we take my 2200 picofarad capacitor, we look up the on resistance of the JFET on the datasheet, multiply those two values together, times it by 5, and that tells us how long to hold our comparator open for. Then we can make a one-shot with the input resistor of our comparator with a feedback capacitor to hold the comparator open for one time constant. Okay, so let's have a look at these voltage spikes. So we can think of the JFET as a switch with a capacitor at the input that we have to charge up to turn the JFET on. Now we remember that capacitors allow sharp transitions to pass through them. So while that capacitor at the gate is charging up, some of that sharp output of the comparator is actually able to leak through the JFET, injecting charge into the integrator just before we switch the JFET on to reset it. If we think about this gate capacitance, it's very small, only a few picofarads, and that means that the frequencies that are going to bleed through this circuit are going to be very high. So if we try making a low pass filter with the knee of the filter at 20 kilohertz, that's the high threshold of human hearing, we should be able to filter out these frequencies without affecting our oscillator signal at all. Okay, so we're going to take that low pass filter and we're going to combine it with a gain stage of -4. This is going to scale our output voltage from 0 to 5 volts to 0 to -20 volts. So then the last thing we need to do is just shift that up from -20 to 0 to -10 to +10. So we're going to do that by injecting a current into that summing junction. So if we inject a negative current of 250 microamps, that will cause the output of the op-amp to inject a positive current of 250 microamps, which will drop +10 volts across that feedback resistor. You'll likely need to trim the resistance with a small trim pot like I have in my diagram, just to account for things like tolerances of your other resistors. Okay, so I've added this final op-amp stage. As well, notice we've got lots of decoupling, and when you do your proper layout on a piece of perf board, you want to make sure that you've got every chip individually decoupled as close to the power pins as you can possibly get. So the final point we need to know is how are we going to work out what frequency this is going to oscillate at? How I basically approach this is I pick the lowest frequency frequency that I want to oscillate at, and then pick what voltage I want that frequency to be. Well, you could then use one of these two equations to pick the capacitor that you need or the current that you need. I'm going to pick a lowest frequency here of about 25 hertz at 2.5 volts. So minus 2.5 is giving me 25.1 hertz. As I double the control voltage, the frequency of oscillation should also double. Now we can see at 5 volts per division, we've scaled and shifted into plus minus 10 volts, gotten rid of that little spike, and at minus 5 volts, we've got 50.2 hertz. At minus 10, we've got 100 hertz. Double it again to minus 20, and we get 200 hertz. At the moment, we have a linear relationship, which means we have to double the voltage to go up an octave. What we want is an exponential relationship where the frequency doubles for every volt. Check out this video if you want to see how to build a sine wave oscillator, or check me out on Patreon if you want to see lots of bonus content. See you next time.